So thank you. We will now proceed with the final part of our conference, which is a policy debate, as already mentioned, on sport for employability, with the emphasis on young needs, and would be very happy to introduce the members of the panel for you. And we will then, of course, ask them to turn on their camera. And I already see the first person and already the second and as well coming in. So thank you for being on time as well, and for your discipline in that matter. I would first introduce Marisa Fernandez Esteban, who is a doctor of law and who's currently the deputy head of the EU Sport Unit. And as I'm not mistaken, she's also the deputy head of the EU Sport Youth Policy Unit. She's nodding, so we are good with that. And I know from looking at her resume that she has a long tradition of working for the European Commission. So you're very well positioned to give your perspective on the EU. Thank you for your participation on that. Next is Giovanni Di Cola. I'm not seeing him for the moment right away, but Giovanni is already also in the meeting. He might want to turn his camera on if that's okay for you. Yes, you are there. Thank you, Giovanni. Giovanni is has a PhD in development economics, and he is a special advisor to the Office of the Deputy Director General of International Labour Organization, the ILO, which is a UN agency located in Geneva. Giovanni served in, as I'm not mistaken, 4 UN agencies until now. And among other things, he has also worked extensively on building bridges between sport world and sustainable development goals, SDGs. So also very interesting to have him here as well. Next up is Saad Mohammed, has a degree in sport business management. Hi, Saad. Head of Research and Impact at Sport for Life UK, one of our partners as well of the Monitor project. Saad has expertise in monitoring and evaluation, which comes handy in this context, strategic planning and project performance analysis. We then have also Eva Glibo, Master of Arts at the Faculty of Kinesiology of University of Zagreb, where she got that degree. And she's currently a research assistant and a PhD candidate in Munich. She's a committee member, that's why we asked her. She's a committee member of ENGSO Youth, which is the youth organization of ENGSO, also a member of our project, and we are very happy to have her as well. Next is Harry Waite. Harry is a project manager at DHL UK Foundation, and to be a little bit more specific, you might want to talk a little bit about that, but the DHL UK Foundation is dedicated to supporting education and employability of disadvantaged children and young people across the UK. They're committed to working in a partnership with a number of organizations, also with charities, like-minded, supporting young people to develop employability skills, gain working experience with the outcome to progress into employment. So well positioned here as well. He's in fact also responsible for delivering a paid work placement program in Street League in the UK. And then Fred doesn't need any introduction, already gave that. So we're all set to go. And I would like to start with the first question for Marisa, if you don't mind. As deputy head of the EU Sport Unit, as we all know, that the EU is very committed to combat a high unemployment rate among young people, and also recognizes the potential of sport to help in this context. We'd like to know, why do you think that sport can be of help here?
Thank you for your question, Mark. Yes, indeed. I think it is clear that employability is a challenge for young people due to their failure to meet the labor market expectations. So how can a sport, what is the role of sport in all this? A sport is recognized through its power as a powerful tool for health, education, skills development, promotion of values, social inclusion, and has a significant social and economic value. But why is the reason that that makes sport such a useful tool for this? Sport breaks barriers of all kinds, and it is an excellent instrument to reach to the hard to reach. We are all equal in the pitch, if we can say that, and there is no need to speak or write that could sometimes add as barriers. At the same time, sport conveys soft skills and values that are more and more important in the world market, such as teamwork, endurance, fair play, respect, and self-esteem. So we consider that sport does an important role in developing various precious skills that are crucial in making young people more employable. Some research even suggests that being involved in sport can equip young people with a specific core and soft skills that may raise their level of employability indeed. So this is confirmed by research. Core skills, as I mentioned, include those that directly associated with coaching and sport management. Soft skills like the ones I mentioned: cooperation, leadership, respect for others, knowing how to win and lose, knowing how to manage a competition, enduring, etc. And also we have there's scientific evidence that sport helps students to have better results at school. So children and young people who play sports normally get better results at school, and they are more engaged in school. So finally, I would like to highlight that sport volunteering is also an important aspect to develop social skills. So as you can see, sport is a multifaceted factor that can help support employability of young people in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, and we definitely will come back to you with more questions, but I think it's good to have a warming up round for each of the panel members. I would like to give the floor to Giovanni Nicola. And Giovanni, knowing your broad perspective and broad experience in international policy with relation to that to this topic as well, what do you regard basically as the most important policy challenges that you see in this domain, and could you explain why you think these are the major challenges? You have to turn on your mic, Giovanni. Don't forget.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, thanks for inviting me to take part in this panel. As indicated in the webinar, I think it is worth mentioning that the approach of Monitor was great with respect to the theory of change and results-based approach. I think that is fundamental, first of all, because it is to be employed when we talk about employability and skills. It's absolutely necessary. And I also wish to thank the EU, because we have more than a European approach, as you may imagine, being a UN organization, a universal organization, and I'm not seeing the same kind of sensitivity to skills and employability in sport and outside the sport in other regions. So I think it's good to have such a support for innovative projects. I also see a limitation, which I want to put forward immediately, because as you know, I studied this topic already more than 10 years ago, and we published on skills and employability at the time. The point for me is that when we talk about sport plus, that plus should be defined. And Maria Luisa was indicating rightly so a number of areas where employability and sport are particularly structured. So in other terms, she indicated target groups like volunteers, like managers and youth and so on. And I think we have to be very precise going forward towards that ending. We have to be careful in the way we are going to disseminate such tool. The second weakness, which is a strength of the Monitor manual, but it is a weakness and we have to acknowledge it if we want to disseminate it together as a group and even beyond our own group, is that the capacity in sport is extremely low. I mean, the capacity of European NOCs is certainly higher, but I can tell you, working with the International Federation myself, every day, I can tell you that the capacity is low. Even President Bach recognized it in his own speeches to the sport community, like saying we need to work with platforms, simply because we are not able to work in all areas like integrity and so on and so forth. So your tool is essential. The point is who is going to use it. Now, I am more confident that sport organizations like those who have presented, who basically are socially oriented, are more comfortable in using it rather than the sport per se organization. And that is something we need to address. I want just to make one link with the mapping that was undertaken by the European Union recently with respect to post-pandemic. It's important to know that those mapping exist because it does not only focus on sport, but it does focus on the importance of recreation, the importance of physical education, the importance of physical activity. So basically, it turns around the pyramid of sport. And I think that's the kind of discussion we need to have. I'm confident that this is possible with the European Union, simply because I've been working on this for many years and I only see that kind of vision. I salute this project. I'm not here just to celebrate. You know that I'm critical and I was not happy with respect to the benchmarking. But I also need to say that the work was sound, and the approach is absolutely essential. Yes, this approach of theory of change is essential. The Commonwealth Secretariat has been picking it up as a model for the SDGs. So there are some good examples out there, but perhaps we need to see how this can be further disseminated. I stop there because otherwise I would continue for long. I'm sorry, I'm in a car because I have to pick up my son. I haven't seen him for a year. He's coming from a master, so you know there are priorities that we cannot skip. So I'm with you, but I was in office. I had to go out because he's coming earlier. Thanks for now.
Thank you, Giovanni. If you're still around, we come back to you. I don't know whether you are able to just join.
I will.
Okay. Just to, I think you raised a point here, and I think, but we can have during the debate coming back to your issue in terms of what would be the added value of the monitor manual, for example, for the general sports sector. I think basically it was not intended to be for that sector. It was intended for, as it is indicated quite clearly in the title, for sport for employability organizations, which I think makes an important point, but to a certain extent can be also for a larger group of organizations. But basically we focused on this. Now, thank you for your comments. I would like to pass the floor now to Saad Mohammed. And as you, from a practitioner's point of view, Saad, I'm sure you could give us an insight on what you regard as the most important critical success for factors in the work that you do. There have been mentioned a few already, but could you be more tell a little bit more about that from your perspective? And I would add another question as well. How important is sport in this context?
Okay, thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone. So I'd say in terms of sort of the critical success factors in the work we do, ultimately we want to see sort of young people sort of thrive and progress within employment or education or training, and that's long term. And that's sort of the ultimate goal that we want to see, that young people that come from sort of disadvantaged backgrounds being able to thrive in their work. I think Lindsay sort of touched on that sort of quite a lot in terms of the journey of the young people sort of through their service, and it's similar with Sport for Life. But aside from that, I think it's important to recognise that although we are sport for employment, sport for employability organisations, that we're not going to be able to support all young people into employment. Every young person's on a slightly different trajectory. They join us at a different part of their journey, and ultimately, I think what we want to be able to do is for the young person to leave us in a better place than when they joined us. So, and I think that's ultimately what we like to do. But however, the challenging thing with that is that how can we, to tangibly measure that change? Is sometimes a young person, just for them to complete a program of activity or a course of activity, that's such a big thing in itself. So actually being able to evidence and record them being able to do that, whether that's through sort of life skills measurement or some form of sort of critical assessment that we do sort of with the young person is is really important. And I think the work with the within this project as well, and some of the tools that have come out from the manual are sort of really sort of critical for that, to actually measure that journey of change that the young person goes through, whether they make it into sustained long-term employment at the end or not. But we can still, as an organisation, see the impact that we've had. Obviously, we won't be the only people that impact on the lives of those young people. There'll be other factors and stakeholders and the people that will impact that. But we ultimately want to see that we've had a positive impact on them. And then in terms of how important sport is for us as an organisation, it's very important. So we work with sort of two key age groups. So we work with young people who are already in education, employment, or training. So, but from a younger age group, so 11 to 18s, and then we also work with the typical sort of NEETs, not in education, employment, or training population from 16 to 29. And the importance of sport differs between those two age groups. So overall, our company so far, we've had over 50% of young people that we've engaged with participate in sports. So far this year, we've engaged with just over 1,000 young people, and just over 500 of those have engaged in sports. So we can see it's quite an important tool. Similar to what Lindsay was saying, it's a really important way of engaging young people onto our programs. And it's a really important, it is that glue, and it's that teaching tool that we use. It's the vehicle for change. For our younger age group, it's really sort of to use to develop those life skills. So we work on communication, behaviour, teamwork, motivation, and sort of it's really designed to sort of support those young people to improve those through a structured syllabus that we work on sort of week to week. We use a young person's led approach. So we ask our young people what sort of activities they want to do, physical activities and sport, and we use that to try and get the maximum impact out of that. The bridge that we have between sport and employability is a qualification or qualifications that we run. So we work with sports leaders, and we deliver sports leaders qualifications from sort of level 1, level 2, and onwards. And so these qualifications, they're not really based around sport, but it's based around leadership. We use sport just as the tool, as the engagement tool and the tool for learning, whereas the qualification itself sort of transcends sport itself, and it can be used in a variety of different vocations. And that's the bridge that we have between sport and employability, and young people sort of make that transition through our service. So they will engage with sport, and then they will sort of go on to sort of take part in more training activities, such as the sports leaders qualification. They'll work with mentors and other employability activities. We have other young people that enter our service directly through mentoring. And again, we will use the qualification, sports leaders, and other training activities and sport in order to develop their skills further, sort of from a one-to-one basis into group and training activities. So in summary, sport is very important for us. Young people reach that through different avenues. Some people it's the entry point, and for other people it's used as a teaching tool to develop their skills further.
Thank you for a clear answer. I think it makes sense that we then look at sport as a crucial element in the work that you all are doing. So that also reflects on the EU's interest in using the potential of sport. Thank you. I would turn to Eva now. As a committee member of ENGSO Youth, also would say you represent a little bit the youth population here as well. I think that's an important element we should not forget in this debate. So I've read through your ENGSO Youth strategy 2020-2023, and I've seen that you set very high expectations for the potential of sport with regard to education and employability of young people. It also refers to the recognition of sport as a valuable tool for education in school, employability opportunities for youth in sports sector, role of volunteering, which we have not addressed yet, as a tool for non-formal education and employability, lifelong learning. I can go on through informal and non-formal education into sport. So a little bit similar questions I had for Marisa. Why do you think that sport is capable of doing this? Because you said high standards.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mark. Well, yeah, the question is going in pretty much similar direction to Marisa, so I will not repeat what Marisa said, but I will just emphasize that also at ENGSO, since we are a European policy-oriented organization, representative organizations, we tend to also support European Union's and European Commission's direction. So this is why we are kind of, going in the similar direction. We also take into consideration the latest research, also the scientific approach to what we claim to have. I think also one crucial thing, two crucial points that I want to put in here is the word potential, which is also, we do not take it for granted. We do not think that sport is a solution for everything. We do not have a panacea approach to sport can solve all the world problems. And also, as Professor Coalter emphasized at the beginning, sport is not a priori good or bad. It is just the way it is governed, the way the programs are delivered, and the way the intentions are made into deliveries. So this is something that we also try to put across to our membership as well, and also in our programs. And a second point that I want to emphasize is education. So we in ENGSO Youth have a working group, and we have a working group that is named Education and Employability. So for us, this goes very, very much hand in hand. So education as a tool, education, is something that can contribute to sports potential. Of course, the quality needs to be there, and the quality of provision in particular. One point you also raised, Mark, was volunteering, in kind of the role of volunteers. We know that sport in the EU is a main volunteering, let's say, bubble. A lot sport volunteers are, I think 6% of people in the EU volunteer, and most of them come from sports. So there is a lot of people and a lot of potential there for impact. So I will just, put across my personal story now that I have been going through in the last couple of months. We are applying for a project, and I got the opportunity to write a project for ENGSO Youth. So as my volunteer engagement, this will then, I also noticed so much that it has helped me, to learn how to do it, to connect with partners, to build bridges, to build networkships, to, go through all this process. And for me, for my, let's say, CV, this is so much of use, and I can take so much from that. So I think, for us, we are aware that it's not really per se that these benefits happen, but we see the great potential.
Okay, thank you for this confirmation of what was said already, also by Fred in his presentation, and for giving your perspective on this. I would turn also to Harry. Harry just mentioned about the DHL UK Foundation, already mentioned a little bit. You can, of course, also give more info, but I would look from an employer's perspective. What do you regard, or what is your experience in what would be the most important employability skills that employers look for in these young people?
Thank you, Mark, and thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be contributing. Before I answer your question, perhaps I could just give a bit of context and background of where my answer is coming from. So I represent the DHL UK Foundation. We're an independent registered charity in the UK. The clue is that we are linked to DHL Business a little bit. There's a big clue in our name. But our focus, as you said, is supporting disadvantaged young people in the UK from the ages of 5 to 25. So our remit is focused, a lot of it is on the educational piece and providing them with support and development from early years right the way through to once they've left education and end up without employment, educational training. And we work very closely with Street League for that older group of young people to get them into work. We also work very closely with the DHL business, and the DHL business has 40,000 employees across the UK, and we can bring in those employees in work time. So it's not strictly volunteering, but they're giving up their time in work to come and support those young people develop their essential skills. So I'm coming back round to your question here. Those essential skills are very much what's been covered earlier. So, but they would differ depending on what age group we're looking at. But if we look at the age group of students that are in school, perhaps primary, starting to think about what those careers might look like in their local area, what their dad's doing, what their mum's doing, what their auntie's doing, what their friends' parents are doing. And maybe they're a driver at DHL, or maybe they work in IT at DHL, or they're in HR at DHL, because DHL is local to them in that community. And rather than them thinking about, oh, just a doctor or a pilot or a vet or whatever, a zookeeper, whatever else it is as a child that you think of immediately, and nothing beyond that. We begin to talk about the careers that are realistic and practical in that local area. So there's lots of careers talks going into schools and getting them to broaden their horizons. And obviously underpinning that is those essential skills around knowledge and communication skills, teamwork and confidence, and all of the good things that we've just spoken about. So from my perspective, I fund, my organisation funds charities in the UK, and we fund 8 charities that we've selected carefully that deliver outreach to these groups of young people, including Street League, and they help us deliver those essential skills, and we can provide some experienced professionals in their local area to come and deliver those essential skills through CV and interview practice, or through team working sessions, or networking and communication sessions. That's my perspective. If you ask the DHL business, what they would say is, if I was taking somebody on as a new starter, what they need is willingness to learn, and everything else can be taught and everything else can be learned. And we've got some fantastic examples in the business of where that's happened, where somebody's gone in at a part-time warehouse operative, so they're stacking shelves or picking things off the shelves to pack into lorries, and 40 years later they're the chief executive of the organisation. He's now actually the chair of our board as well. So there's these examples that if you've got the willingness and the desire to progress, then you can develop. But of course, you need a huge network of support under that. And having those, being reliable and turning up on time is a really basic skill, but something that's essential to have that willingness and demonstrate that willingness. And then to be able to communicate with your colleagues as well, to grow. And I think underpinning all of that has to be confidence, doesn't it? So that young person has to believe in themselves, to have that willingness, to believe that they have value to give in the first place. And that's where organisations like Street League, and I'm going to, from what Saad said as well, like Sport for Life as well, really help grow with those young people. So they're helping grow their confidence so they can go into an organisation, and they have that willingness because they have that self-belief. And for us, Street League's such an important partner in that space because they provide the support as well to help that young person succeed. So the young person's coming in with some new confidence, they've got that desire and willingness, but they've maybe never done it before. So Street League is that bit of helping hand, even when they're in work with DHL, to support and succeed. Mark, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you for clarification. Also trying to elaborate on this. Fred, I would like to give you the floor. You've given your presentation, you've given your thoughts already, but you might want to share some of your thoughts. That's what you heard just now.
Okay, I'd like to make a general point raised by Marisa, Giovanni, and in part by Eva. It's about the general relevance of sport. I don't think that the generic sports sector has a real role to play here, because the generic sports sector is concerned with the development of sport and competitive sport. And sport to be used for development has to have a mastery orientation. Competitive sport is non-inclusive. It's an exclusive environment. And also, I think that such organizations start with sport and assume that they're relevant to young people, whereas the organizations we've seen today, like Street League and Sport for Life, start with the needs of young people and then work towards sport. so they adapt sport to the needs of young people. I don't think generic sports organizations have the skills or willingness.
I keep having this issue where after 10 minutes, my laptop just completely
sorry,
disconnects
there's
from the
somebody
Wi-Fi.
saying, sorry, there's one user, there's
I
somebody.
can do it because I had that issue on one day and have things just connected directly into the.
Hold on, somebody's using their microphone. Put them on. Okay, thank you. Please.
So what I'm saying is that I think that and it's what Eva said, that she doesn't see sport as a panacea. It's not. If you start with the needs of young people and work backwards, that's how you design a program. You don't start with the belief that sport on its own can deliver, particularly if you've got competitive sport coaches delivering it, who can be immensely insensitive. And competitive sport entails losing as well as winning, and losing can be quite damaging to already vulnerable young people. So I think that it's the way that sport is used by sport and employability projects, which is the important thing to understand. They start with the needs of young people and work backwards, and that's why the programs are so successful.
Okay, thank you, Fred, for sharing this. There's a hand raised by Giovanni. If you don't mind, Giovanni, I will give you the floor in a minute. I would like to turn first the floor back to Marisa to have another question, and then I will right away come to you afterwards, if you don't mind. Marisa, it's about looking a little bit about the role the EU can play, and of course, other than already helping to set up and funding a project like ours. Do you see any specific role in this matter? And also in the second, at the same time, do you see responsibilities on that matter for the EU member states?
Yes, thank you, Mark. I would like to say that sport, it is a very young EU policy, and it was introduced in the EU treaties by the Lisbon Treaty. So we have a task there as European Commission to develop the European dimension of sport. This is what is written there. By promoting fairness, openness in sporting competitions, cooperation between bodies responsible for sport, and by protecting the physical and moral integrity of sportmen and sportwomen, especially the youngest. In addition, I would like to say this, the treaty highlights the social and educational function of sport. So we have a lot of things to do, it's ambitious, but what I would like to highlight here is that it is a supporting role. We cannot drive, you cannot draw a legislation, adopt any kind of rules, but we can put in place and roll out supporting measures. And what we do to deal with this and promote this educational dimension of sport. So the main tool we have at our disposal is the Erasmus Plus program that is financing this project. We also have additional sources of funding, which are less important, but still we can finance a number of projects, which are pilot projects and preparatory actions. It's extra money that the European Parliament entrusted us with to support additional projects. Then we can support and we will do support exchanges and mobility in the future with Erasmus+. This is a novelty of the new Erasmus+ program that started this year. So what can we do? We can also, through this enhancement, these supporting measures, we can finance projects. We can even support the enhancement of coaches' skills and competences because they are multipliers. And we also can promote the exchange and development of good practices between authorities, between member states. So hence, this is the role that we have. So I would like to refer to two particular aspects. The first one is the role of coaches, which is key, as I said. So because coaches have a key role to play in not only to lead and guide participants in sport, they have an impact on the participants' knowledge, skills, prospects, aspirations, health, well-being, and values. The role of coaches has been largely debated between the member states last year, and the Council of the Ministers adopted a council conclusions on empowering coaches by enhancing opportunities to acquire skills and competences. So there, the ministers acknowledge the member states the important contribution of coaches for their direct training and learning process and their personal development, and we can play a role in this through Erasmus. Plus, not only with these projects, as I mentioned, but in future, we will roll out the possibility for coaches to travel to enjoy mobility, as now it's happening in other parts of Erasmus Plus, like higher education, youth. We will have that for staff and particularly coaches. And this will have, of course, not only an impact in the education and skills of coaches, but because they are multipliers, this is the language of the youth sector, they will have a cascade impact also on educating people who are in sport. I think this is particularly important in the health crisis we are living, the COVID pandemic. It is in this perspective that enhancing coaches' skills and training as multipliers will allow this, Erasmus Plus will allow this mobility, as I said. The other aspect I would like to highlight here, apart from those educating those how to reach and providing them with the necessary skills, we also have a role to play in promoting the dual career of athletes, because athletes enter the sport careers. Some of them are very famous, and I would say they make quite some money in their athlete careers. But then many of them face challenges to combine the sporting career with the education while they are at the peak of their careers in their late, when they're 18, even younger, and then early 20s, and combining this with education. So this is an issue because the aim of succeeding at the highest level of sports demands intensive training, and this can really keep them off their education. So we have the role to keep an eye on these professionals, and also to allow them to move outside of the sport careers or the competition careers to other positions in the sport world if they wish. And so we find, and we published some guidelines in 2014, and we have also financed a number of Erasmus Plus projects in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you raise an important question, the role of coaches in this, with regard to the competences and skills as multipliers. We unfortunately won't have time to go into all aspects. You see, it's a broad topic, but an important element as well, also referring to youth sector. So I would like to give the floor back to Giovanni, who raised his hand. I also see a hand from Harry, but just hold on for a minute.
Thank you, Mark and fellows. Let me say something with respect to the coaches, for example. If the coaches are abusing athletes, then the issue of skills should be taken from a different perspectives. The other issue that Fred was mentioning was about the fact that, if we focus skills for sport plus entities, basically we are not actually addressing the issue of sport. I do not agree with it. First of all, because the multiplier is not so easily addressed as in theory, and we have proof of this. Second, because when you talk about employability skills, there is no transferability between sectors. So those are limitations that we should address. And then my last point is, yes, we do have line of products, even in the European model. But even the issue of dual career nowadays can be easily reviewed, taking into consideration what is happening both in sport and in the labor market. So I think that monitor puts the limit a bit further. I want to take this very positively. I think that is where we should go. We should go a bit further down the lane, and we should not limit ourselves to say, we are safe if we apply this only to sport for employability organization. That's my challenge. My last point is with Fred. We have been involved in the SDP for 20 years or so, my conclusion out of a research which I've done is if there were not an involvement by SDP guys like us for all these years, all the changes in sport would not have happened. As simple as that. And I can give you, but we do not have time today to do so, but they can definitely give you the steps and when we did all this, including his own work. So I think that is some of the lines that were outlined by Maria Luisa are still there, and they project the vision of the EU. But outside, particularly in the employability and the skills initiative of the EU, is not so easily, there is no bridge to walk over it. My point is we should build that bridge. And Monitor actually creates an opportunity to build that kind of bridge. That's my viewpoint on it. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention, and also for your last comment you made about the value that the Monitor might have. So we much appreciate it, and I know we have a debate which is not easy to organize from a distance, but if you don't mind, Eva and Saad, I would first give the floor to Harry because he raised his hand, and you might want to intervene at any time, but we'll come back to you undoubtedly.
Thanks. I'll try not to take too much time. I was reflecting on what Fred had said as well, actually, about organisations starting with young people to provide sport rather than the other way around, and also sport being competitive for those young people. So I can only talk about the experiences I've had. So Street League is the main experience here. We find we do informal football sessions or sports sessions with DHL employees and Street League young people. So this is a really great way of young people meeting a potential employer in a really informal way. So if I tackle my future manager on a football pitch, those barriers are immediately reduced. And it's much more empowering for that young person to then go into an interview with that same person and succeed. So that's, I'm guessing I'm preempting a question you may ask me about the power of sport, and that's really what we see. Fred, what we see though also is that the Street League young people are naturally better at sport than the DHL colleagues who are perhaps not quite as fit or able. And where we've done these informal sports sessions, Street League young people nearly always win, and it's always quite competitive. And it's really empowering for them, and it increases that informal relationship in a way. So there is definitely room for an element of competition, in my view. However, I think it needs to be managed really carefully, and I do understand that elite sport is just about competition. The final point I was going to make was around my experience of other organisations, Harlequins Foundation being one. So Harlequins is a rugby team in the UK, top league rugby team, and they run a foundation of outreach for young people. It's funded partly by them and other organisations as well, but it is separate from that organisation, but takes advantage of the facilities and some of the knowledge that's there. But there is definitely no competitive element there. And I understand that the rugby team came before the foundation, but I still see them doing some good work. So, Fred, I'm not sure if I am missing what you said, but from what I've seen, is there is a place for professional sport and employee sort of student outreach to sit side by side in some way.
You want me
to answer that, Mark?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I think one of the problems is people who are attracted to competitive sport may not be the vulnerable people who are NEETs. You have to have some confidence to join a sports club. You have to have some confidence to play competitive sport already. So you already have the perceived self-efficacy. I can do that. Now, one of the things that Sport for Employability projects are trying to deal with people with low perceived self-efficacy, people with low beliefs in themselves, people with poor self-esteem. Now, those are not people who might be attracted to competitive sports programs. And the research, for example, in relation between sport and educational performance can't disinter the cause and effect, because it says that we don't really know that if people who are attracted to sport would achieve anyway. So we can't really work out what sports contribution was. I think we've got to start with the young people themselves and the nature of their vulnerabilities. And those young people will not be attracted to highly competitive sport. The other thing is that if young people have had a series of failures in their lives, if they've had low perceived self-efficacy, and you put them in an environment where they're liable to fail again, you're able to do them more damage than good. So that's why I'm saying you have to start with what these young people are and what their experiences have been. And you may end up designing a competitive program depending on their needs, but you've got to start with their needs rather than the needs of sport. And that's why I have a concern about coaches, because coaches who place emphasis on performance can be very damaging to people who have already failed elsewhere. And I think one of the things that Sport for Employability Projects tries to do is to try to give young people who might not have a previous experience of success some success. So through a mastery-oriented approach, they can see that they can do things if they keep on trying. And that builds up perceived self-efficacy, which, by the way, in our manual, we argue is not an outcome of programs, it's a mechanism. If you don't build up perceived self-efficacy very early on, if you don't equip young people with the belief that if they try, they can achieve, they won't benefit from the rest of the program. So those beliefs in themselves have to be built up very, very early on in the program. And in the competitive environment, and they feel you're not building those competences. Sorry, I'm going on a bit.
Fred, I agree with everything you just said.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for the agreement, Harry. And you raised another issue about the coaches, as well as Marisa already. I think we should organize another conference about the role of coaches and what that would mean in terms of sport for employability. I would now like to also give the floor, considering the time, so we are running a little bit out of time, but it's an interesting debate, so I want to give each of you an opportunity to respond. Saad, I was just thinking, and I recall that from our visits we made to Sport for Life as well, you encounter a lot of challenges with your work. And we have also been informed about some of the changes that you made throughout the years in terms of the organization and design of your program. Could you a little bit relate to that and tell us a little bit what type of changes you made? Why did you make them?
Sure, no problem. So a really interesting debate, and hopefully I can sort of touch upon some of the things that have been said as well. So in terms of sort of the most important challenges we're facing as an organisation, I think Lindsay, in one of her slides, really mentioned it. Is that youth unemployment at the moment coming out of the pandemic? So, 3 out of 5 workers who've lost their jobs are 16 to 24-year-olds. And at Sport for Life, we work with sort of quite a diverse ethnic community. And actually those young people from diverse ethnic backgrounds suffer even more as a part of that population. So as an example of that, during the pandemic, so pre-pandemic, there was sort of 25% of economically active Black young people aged 16 to 24 were unemployed, and that's compared to 10.5% of their white counterparts. So that's the pre. But actually, by the end of 2020, the unemployment rate amongst Black young people rose to 34% from 25%, whereas in comparison, the unemployment rate for white young people rose to 13% from 10.5%. So actually, with all things being equal, you'd expect the unemployment rate to raise equally across those two populations. But actually, there's a massive disparity. There's a massive disparity there, and that's actually along with unemployment for young people. The challenges is also around that, is around the barrier of race as well. We work with quite a diverse community, so normally 80 to 85% annually of our young people come from diverse ethnic backgrounds. So that is a big challenge. And in terms of addressing those type of things, is we've recently invested in an employability partnership manager, who is sort of they're tasked with finding opportunities for young people. So actually trying to put young people on a more equitable level in terms of getting in front of employers, finding them those opportunities. But also what's really important for us is trying to change attitudes and behaviours of young people. So if young people growing up in disadvantaged backgrounds always think that there's only a certain level that they can aspire to, then we're not really solving the problem. It's, you know, we need to sort of take off that ceiling, that self-imposed ceiling that sometimes, you know, young people can have that. And we also need to, you know, empower them to actually, you know, break those barriers, be trailblazers within their communities and, you know, within their families as a start point, and you know, be that change. And I think that's sort of, you know, quite significant, especially now that we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, but also, you know, supporting more and more young people to sort of re-engage. And then in terms of some of the changes that we've been through, I think it almost marries a little bit with the presentation that sort of Fred did at the beginning around sport plus one, sport plus two. So as an organisation, we started off as a sport for sport's sake organisation. We deliver sport in disadvantaged communities, and, you know, we'd hope that we'd made a difference by the time, you know, we'd finished with that. But there wasn't any, you'd say, any kind of strategy sort of within that, apart from sport being a diversionary activity for young people. So actually, you're diverting them from antisocial behaviour at the times that, you know, they'd be playing sport with you. And then over the years, we've undertaken a couple of strategic shifts. So a big strategic shift to, you know, to turn from sport for sport's sake to sport for development and sport for employability. So really having that strategic shift around, you know, how do we make that tangible difference to young people? So actually, when we're delivering sport, what's that tangible impact on that young person that they can take on into the future? And that's where we develop programs around, you know, using qualifications to, you know, drive through change, but also specific sport syllabus, so young people are developing skills as they go along. And then sort of as a knock-on effect from that, really, over the last few years, we've then again sort of changed from a one-size-fits-all approach where a young person will do everything within our organisation that we have to offer, so sport, qualifications, employability, one-to-one support, etc. Is actually we've taken a much more young person-centred, tailored approach. So actually we offer young people what they need based on an intake assessment that we do with them. So some young people might be quite close to the job market. So we might have someone that's a university graduate, and we also might have someone that is unemployed for 2 or 3 years, and their needs are completely different. And we appreciate that, and we work with young people based on those needs. So a young person that comes out of university may just need a bit of support with their sort of mock interview or interview preparations, you know, depending on what their needs are, versus someone that's 2 or 3 years out of work may need a whole host of options for support, which may include qualifications, upskilling, you know, really building up their confidence and self-esteem before we're able to support them into work. So I think those are sort of the really key changes around, you know, moving from sport for sport's sake to sport for development and sport for employability, but now taking a person-centered approach and having a tailored program of support for each young person to support them in the best possible way on their journey into employment. And then lastly, the conversation we were having, discussion around sort of mastery versus competition. I also believe there's a place for both. But one place where I believe there's sort of quite a stark difference is around female participation in sport. And I think the motivations for young women that we work with, especially anecdotally, is around their motivation is quite low for coming into sport. But when they do come in, their motivation for being there is completely different. It's that support network that offers. And it's not necessarily the activity that you're taking part in, it's that support network, that social cohesion and inclusion that plays a really big part in what they're doing. And we often find in the type of activities that young women are interested in, they tend to, from our anecdotal evidence, veer away from the traditional sports, but they go towards, I guess, well-being, fitness, so a lot of yoga and fitness, and also you know, things that generally aren't competitive but offer that support group structure for one another. So that's my 2 pence on that.
Thank you, Saad. And looking at the body language of the other people in this panel, I think you raised some interesting points as well. Last question for you, Eva. If I read again in your youth strategy that you aim for decent work for youth within the grassroots sports sector. Now, the question I have for you is, what types of job are you referring to, and are there many of these job opportunities?
Okay, thanks for the question. I just briefly would like to reflect on what has just been said, you know, in this discussion, competition versus non-competition. And, you know, we also had Saad put it really nicely, this transition of organizational aim and structures towards, more development approach. So I would support that. And also, I don't think competition is necessarily bad. It's just the way it is framed. Okay, you might lose, but what happens if you win? So for me, that's also something for coaches to be able to do. So in terms of your question now, I dug up some data from the European Sports Satellite account, which says that 2.72% of all jobs in European Union are somehow related to sports. So there is a market for sports. There is a huge employability potential for sports. In terms of young people, the issue is the access to that, market. So I think also in terms of policy regulations, for example, if we take the example of young coaches, and some of them are minors, and a lot of countries do not have even mechanisms to kind of support the minors' involvement in sports sector. So this is something for me that is crucial for European Union also to look at and to establish the mechanisms for support for member countries to do so. Because, these jobs usually come from within the organization. So former athletes take on the roles, with novel athletes going in. So I think for me, this is something that needs to be resolved really quickly. And this is only one of the examples of what still needs to be done on European level, and going from bottom up to down to member countries, then to sports clubs. But I think, just to answer your question in brief, yes, there is a potential. Yes, young people can find jobs in sports sectors. Yes, we need to make more to enable decent work and decent employment opportunities for them.
Okay, thank you for your insight on that as well. I think looking at the time, we promised to stop on time, and I must say we covered a lot already. Not only in this debate on different aspects, we see it's a multifaceted phenomenon where we definitely need to focus more in the future. So I hope we can find opportunities to do that and to continue this debate, because I think it's important to bring both practitioners together with policymakers, together with academics. So I think it's important collaboration we must set up. So I can only encourage people to take this up as well. Now, so I want to thank you, each of you, for the panel. And I know, and I'm feeling a little bit guilty now. I promised the audience that there should be time for asking questions, but we're running out of time. I really hope that you had enough opportunity to reflect on things that have been said over the past 2.5 hours. It's gone over very fast. So I hope you can forgive me for not giving you the floor back. But if you do have questions, I would refer to our website where we still want to look at, and also our social media. I want to say a little bit about that as well. So thank you, members of the panel, for your participation. And we still have a lot of questions in our minds, but I think we have to leave it for that. It was very interesting, very inspiring. So thank you for that. I just want to address again to the audience, if you don't mind, that there's some practical issues I just want to mention. First of all, again, stressing that the manual, which is available in the PDF file at the on our website, and also the Excel spreadsheets and the video produced by John Taylor from Sterling University was also part of our team. Also the webinar, as I mentioned, we will make the recordings and the presentations, as already mentioned, also available. I want to stress again, also, no, not again, I want to stress also the fact that we have now, as of today, also provided translated summaries, also available on the website, both in German, Dutch, Hungarian, and French. So to make it as big as possible to our dissemination strategy. So today's presentations will be there, and we also will produce soon a video We're giving some major impressions of the different phases of the project that will also become available. So for me, it's a great honor to have chaired this session. Also, it's our final official event we have in this monitor project, which is about to end real soon. So I want to thank, of course, all the partners that were involved. Thank you so much for your willingness to cooperate, taking into consideration the difficult circumstances under which we had to do the second part of this project. We still managed to do that, so thank you. I would also want to thank people behind the scenes, not only me and Fred and John, who was also present in the gave a presentation in the webinar, but also Tessa Commerce. Also would like to thank Inge de Rom and Karim van den Hoeken. They were all back office people, but they were their support was well needed, and we were very happy to have them on board. So the only thing I would, and that would really be my last comment, and then I would say to you, and that would be my last comment basically, I all wish you an enjoyable summer, and hopefully it's a better one than last year, and that there's a bright future ahead of us in terms of going out and doing things we like to do, especially also sport. Thank you, and goodbye.